You are listening to the Slow Living Podcast, and I'm your host, Stephanie O'Day. What if I told you that you could truly have the life of your dreams, the life you've always wanted, one filled with abundance, joy, and a sense of purpose? It's absolutely possible, and I see it each and every day with my coaching clients. It all starts with learning how to slow down. You deserve to live the life you've always dreamt about. Let's get started. So if you're a fan of the podcast, you're going to absolutely love the book. Slow Living, Cultivating a Life of Purpose in a Hustle-Driven World is now available wherever books are sold. Buy it for yourself, your children, your friends, and your neighbors. You can get all the juicy details at stephanieoday.com/slow living book. Trust me, this is hands down the best $20 you'll ever spend. Hi there, Slow Down Society. Steph here, and we're on episode 148 of the Slow Living Podcast. And today, my friend Amylee, aka the Productive Mama, is in the house with me. And we are going to be continuing with our slow parenting series. And today, we're going to be talking about the tween and teen years. And I'm absolutely thrilled to have this conversation. I get a lot of questions on how to have great teenagers and tweenagers and navigating the adolescent years, and what do you do about social media and all of that kind of stuff. So Amylee and I are going to dive into that today. So Amylee and I have known each other for quite a few years. She runs the productivemama.com website and is a wife and mother to 3 girls. Same. And her girls are now high school and college age. She lives in what she calls the land of enchantment, aka New Mexico. She was one of those moms who home birthed, breastfed, cloth diapered, co-slept, and made baby food and homeschooled. Now she has a home business, and she's most recently owning and managing Inspired Birth and Families, a pregnancy and family resource center offering childbirth classes and parenting classes from infant sign language, positive parenting, menu planning, traditional food prep, and more. And these classes and years spent around families, combined with her natural tendencies towards planning and productivity, planted the seeds for the productivemama.com website. Amylee, thank you so much for being here and spending so much time with us today.
Thank you. I always love to talk to you. So
it's fun.
Hopefully we'll have some. Go ahead.
No, I love seeing your name in my inbox. So obviously I'm on all of your mailing lists, but then it's fun for me when I send out a newsletter and then you write back to me. I absolutely, absolutely love it. So, okay, let's talk about the tween and teen years, because I know you've got a lot of thoughts, as do I.
Yes. So we both have our girls, so we have more girl experience. But I will also say, I'll add to this that last year I started teaching high school part-time. So I've been getting a little more teen perspective. So I actually, when you started your slow parenting series, some of the things you said about I don't know about infancy, but toddlerhood, those younger years really hit me as, yeah, that's where it makes a difference in those teen years. And I have always said to folks, you really have to invest in those difficult early years. It's much harder to course correct as they get older. But if you start investing time, investing energy, it's exhausting. I know it's exhausting
It is.
To follow through. Basically, I feel like that's a lot of it when they're young, but that's what I feel like pays off later.
Okay. So if someone is listening to this right now and they've got a little one, they've got a toddler or a preschooler, and they want to ensure they're on the correct path so they don't have to course correct, what advice would you dole out?
Like you, I did 1, 2, 3 magic, which some people don't like. It's the focus, I guess, they would say is on punishment. I don't remember exactly what the criticisms are. But I think that's a really good place to start because it's a simple formula, first of all. So when you are part of the challenge of parenting young ones is you're exhausted. So,
Yes.
you read the books and you go, oh yeah, I'm supposed to, get down on the floor and I'm supposed to phrase it this way and I'm supposed to think of their emotional perspective and all that when you are, going on empty yourself because you didn't get enough sleep. So um you've got a kid who is jumping on something or just doing something that is not appropriate behavior. Meanwhile, you're sitting there nursing your baby while your toddler's at your feet.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it is exhausting. You don't want to get up. You just want to tell the kid to do it. And you want the kid to do it, but they're not going to. So I'm just suggesting the 1, 2, 3 magic because it's that simple formula. And then you have to you know, just grab that baby to your breast and go over and gently follow through
Yeah.
on whatever it is that you want the oldest one at whatever age or stage um, to do. And really, that's about teaching your kids that you do follow through, that your word is good, you are trustworthy, and um, they will actually. It doesn't take that many times of doing that before your kids realize, oh, mom said this. And I remember doing it in church once, and
Mm.
my kid was kind of going up the aisle, and just had a little look in her eye, and I just used my fingers. I didn't even talk. And she came back because prior to that, I had left church with my kids when they misbehaved, so they knew that they would get taken out. Which for some kids, maybe that's not a punishment, but for mine, it was kind of embarrassing, to be let out and then to miss kind of the social stuff that came after. Another time, I remember I had a cart full of groceries, and I did not want to leave that, there at the time. I think we had just moved. It was kind of an exhausting time. So no wonder my kid was, not behaving her best. I probably wasn't behaving my best and we were tired. But there was some misbehavior and I left the cart there and just immediately left with her. So those are just two examples, which is just to encourage people to say when that it is hard. It's hard to follow through on some of those things. But it usually doesn't take long for the typical kid um, for them to learn from that. And then you're not doing it nearly as much. And then also, if you have younger kids, if you're doing this, you kind of invest a lot of time and mistakes in the oldest one. The younger kids don't even, they just see it. They see that mom said to do this, and maybe not even the oldest one, maybe the middle is doing something.
Yeah. Yeah.
Other kids see mom says, dad says, and then follows through. What I see so much of is threats, um, and then nothing. If you don't do this, you're not getting dessert, or if you don't do this, we're not going to do this. And I'm thinking, okay, you just, you've already planned this whole day, you've got the tickets, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
We all know that you're going, and that threat is no good. So
Yeah.
I guess
I
that's where
absolutely agree with you. And I have complete are you your story of the grocery store is exactly the same. I think she was 2.5 at the time, and I was either pregnant or the baby was in a sling in a grocery store. It was a brand new grocery store because we had just moved and it was full. And she had a major meltdown and I had already done the warnings. And so I just literally picked her up. I apologized at the front of the store and we walked out. And after a nap, well, we probably went home, had lunch, soaked up air conditioning, had a nap, and then went back and picked up the groceries. But that's what a good parent follow through looks like. It's not empty threats and it's not um, nonstop talking and a lecture without follow through. So I like the term gentle parenting. And in general, I am most deaf a gentle parent. I am not interested in corporal punishment or anything that is hurtful or harmful to the psyche of a child in any way. What I am not okay with is long-winded explanations. So it's not okay to walk into the street right now because the car might hurt you and then that would be sad and then we would have to go to the hospital and blah blah blah. No. kids don't run in the street. End of story. And so having hard, fast rules like that in the toddler years and following through every single time, even when you're utterly exhausted, absolutely pays off in the later years. And I love now that you are in a high school setting, because I can see it with some of my teenagers' friends and on the soccer field. And then I'm in an elementary school. We are constantly looking at each other in wonderment, thinking, these kids have never had any consequences.
Yes, and I think, as they get older, there's more room for discussion for those consequences. But even then, um, it's a little harder with sometimes I say the teen years are like a second toddlerhood because they're experimenting with separating from you and identity and who am I, I'm a big girl or, whatever, things like that. And there are some things that they're more mature. They feel like they're adults. Part of you feels like you can have a conversation to explain your reasoning as a parent. Um, Part of you knows it's going to be lost on them. And so you need to just say, this is the decision. Of course, as teenagers, they don't, take that as easily. And as tweens, even less easily sometimes. And there's of course a lot of room for personality differences in there. I had one kid who just kind of felt like, oh, if you feel like that's, you know, too adult or that's not appropriate, then it must, yes, okay, I can't, that's the oldest in her. And then I have another kid that's going to want to argue back and forth. Um, so agreed as far as sometimes, and I would also tell them, I'm going to listen to what you say, but ultimately we're the parents and this is our decision. And that's just how it is. And one day you'll be before too long. I know it seems forever for you. You get to make all these decisions and you're going to say, oh, remember when everything was taken care of?
Yeah.
Um, so yes. And as far as uh, consequences, yeah, that's when you start seeing that play out when they're teenagers that they haven't had any. And my daughter went to a And also that it's just easier on us to just take care of stuff, right? And not always let our kids suffer those consequences. My daughter went to a fancy private school, and all she wanted was a car. She just, I'll drive a lemon, I'll drive anything. Meanwhile, her peers there get like new fancy cars as soon as they get their license. Then they wreck them, and then there's another car
Mm,
because the parents have the means um, to do that. And my mother-in-law used to say, little kids, little problems, big kids, big problems. So it's so important to start with those little problems and let them suffer those little problems. Um, get those bad grades when they're young, not when they're juniors in high school, where it's really going to make a difference, not when there's a car involved. Things like that. So yes, small consequences. Uh, the goal is then to generalize to those big deal consequences down the road.
absolutely. And I know you and I are on the same page in that um, there natural consequences, such as we're leaving the store or we're turning the car around or things like that, um, up. And it doesn't need to be an abstract consequence. In our house, um, my 14-year-old has a cell phone. Um, and we'll talk about social media and cell phones in a moment. For some of her friends, it doesn't matter what they do, the consequence is they lose their phone. And I am trying to think, I don't think we've ever needed to take the phone away because whatever they did wrong had nothing to do with the phone anyway. So it didn't appear to be a natural consequence. And it never like quote unquote being grounded, I don't really think has ever happened really. And then actually growing up, I don't really ever remember being
Yeah,
grounded.
that's so
Because
interesting because similar. I wasn't ever really grounded, and we never took phones away, though I do have friends that do, and I think it's because the that seems to be the only thing the kids care about. So they feel like, I guess, that gets their attention. Similarly, I never put like controls on the phone.
Yeah.
Um, you wanted to talk a little bit about social
Yeah,
media.
I would love to know that. So, I mean, you and I both spend an awful lot of time online. And so I think because of that, we probably have scared the kids about creepoids starting at a very early age. So I mean, I actually, for myself, even though I ran my business online for years and years, I was a smartphone holdout because I didn't think it would be good for my brain and I didn't want to do it. And I still to this day am not personally active on any social media. I only do it because I feel as if I have no choice, although
Right.
the jury's still out on that because I just had Sandy Cooper on and Sandy runs a business without social media. But
Oh,
yeah, oh, you might actually really the two of
yeah,
you have
I'll
a lot
check
in
that one
common.
out.
Um yeah. So since you already spend so much time online, has that like sort of shaped how you've talked to your children about social media?
I don't know. It's hard to say because you can't, do something and not do something at the same time. Um, I think my kids always knew that what I was doing was work, that it was business, and that ultimately it was to help our family.
Hmm.
So that's one perspective I'll throw out because I didn't think about this too much. The other, I mean, I'm not on every social media platform. Um, the ones that the younger kids use, I'm not really on. And I think, they also know that they have an awareness because as they got a little older, they would want to see what I was posting about them as far as approving pictures and things like that. Um, and I don't post everything, uh, but I have kind of said, well, your family, this is how they just like to see you. And I just post like the holiday picture and things like that. So I don't know. And again, so much of parenting is just your environment and your day to day that I don't remember having a specific conversation. Our conversations have mostly been um, talking about when they would like get an Instagram account and then making it
Mm,
clear. First of all, um, everybody in our house can get into everybody's phone. So we all basically have the same password. So that
yeah.
there's lots of reasons for that I don't know that we have time to go into now.
So I'll share that yes, everyone has that kind of 4-digit Apple thing on their phone, but you're right, we all know each other's and it's for very practical things like your phone is beeping and I want to turn it off or I'm going to
Right.
take a video of you blowing out your birthday candles on your own phone. So yeah, I agree. There's no secrets. We're a family. We also have location tracking on and we all know where each other are all the time. Like I don't think that is an issue in any
Yeah.
way. And then Adam and I, we pay for the kids' phones. So they're essentially
Yeah, so
ours.
that is, you know what, that is the main conversation. I actually do have a cell phone resource, but it is 5 years old now. So I'll share that link.
Okay.
But some of the things we talk about are when they got their cell phones, we waited till I think they're all about 14. And first was that they lived on a table in a main shared living space. Um, that has since changed. Everybody kind of as they've gotten older. Um, every shared password and discussion that I sit down with them periodically, just whenever I want, and they show me what's on their Instagram account or whatever. And then I just had another thing I was gonna say and I forgot. Shared space. Oh, and that yes, that at the beginning, now, I've got older kids. In the beginning, it was this is my phone that I let you use, right? I pay for this phone, this service. We got a lot of hand-me-down phones, so
Yes.
paid means I acquired somehow this phone, and it's for us to communicate. The primary reason to have this phone, and also, I homeschooled my kids till that age, basically till they started high school. So the primary, I didn't need a phone before that. I know where you are, right? Um, Purpose of this phone is to communicate with you, is for me, usually mom, to communicate with you, to say, I'm here, where are you, what time is this over, things like that. So, sort of framing the phone as a tool of communication for the family's good was probably the main conversation. I just had to think about this. It's been so long.
Yeah, no,
Um,
I love how your brain works because mine is completely and totally exactly the same. Like it just hasn't been an issue. Also, I wanted to circle and highlight something about how you said, and then they all lived on the table in a common space until they don't. I love that. I love that as you grow and as you evolve as parents, your rules have to also, because your children are constantly growing and evolving, and there's no black and white in life. There
yes.
really isn't. And these are actual humans that have their own thoughts and feelings and emotions. And it's not like I am the overlord dictating down on you. Like everything is a conversation. And that's how I have always been. And that's what I've always appreciated with conversing with you. And then might sound a little snarky, but I'm gonna say it anyway. And how I like talking to other smart people, because smart people know it's not black and white. There are so many different nuances, and just I could go on and gush about you, Amylee.
Well, thank you. And also your goal too is that your kids are getting more independent and trustworthy. So, as that happened, and that's not to say that I haven't sometimes like peeked my head in and be like, I think it's time for bed, or, what are you doing? Who are you talking to? Things like that. But at the same time, I also throw myself on their bed and say, show me, what's going on. And then also I think, at least especially for one of my kids that I'm thinking about, um, she engaged with some of her peers before she had a phone, who had phones, and she did not like the dynamic a lot of
Mm.
times, right? Where they would get together and it was like all on the phone. So she would be the one that would always tell everybody, even in our house, even me and dad, hang up and hang out. Like we are here together to, so let's like be together. Um, and I think that's, again, I think she had some negative things happen with those friends that really showed her that's not what I want to do. Especially like, uh, hey, we're actually getting to have a sleepover or whatever it is, not something really common. I don't want to be on the phone. Let's do something fun. Um, so I think that's also part of having kids that engage with the real material world, and can appreciate that, because unfortunately, I think we are going to have a lot of kids who do not, and don't get to practice real relationships live and in person, and that makes it harder for them to disengage from their
Yeah.
phones. And
So
we might back with that.
this has come up in the past, maybe not last week, maybe the week before, in a coaching call. And a mom was lamenting that her teenagers were addicted to their phone. And so then I said, okay. And I said, well, what does like a typical evening look like in your household? And what you're describing was their typical evening. They were eating dinner kind of in silence because they're all on their own devices, and then hanging out, quote unquote, together on the couch, but all on their own devices. And I'm like, so you're saying your teens have an addiction to the phone, but how about you? When was the last time you put your phone down? And you could hear the kind of one aha moment, but then also like a oh. And I am not one to judge. You absolutely in your own life and your own family should do what you think is right. But before you start poking at other people, you really do have to look at your own behavior, because you are your child's primary teacher and role model. And if you are living your life behind the screen, that's what they see. happening. And we've all been to, I don't know, I'm just gonna like Crackle Barrel and Applebee's,
Hmm.
and you walk by and there's a family of four all in the booth, all looking at their phones instead of talking to each other. And it's a real thing. And if you personally get itchy and uncomfortable when you don't have Wi-Fi, that's something to pay attention to, because your kids are watching. They're
Yeah, I
truly watching.
recommend camping for
Mm,
families. Somewhere now you can go camping and probably have cell service most places you are, but out here where I live, there's still places where you can go and you're not going to have any kind of connection. So that I think that's great for families because then, you know, you have no choice but to engage with something, nature, something in the material world, basically. Um, so,
yeah.
oh, I lost my train of thought.
No, so I like that. I too am a fan of um camping and unplugging. There are two things that popped in my brain. One is I just read, and it was honestly today, and it was anecdotal evidence that Swifties, so Taylor Swift's audience,
Hmm.
are lamenting the fact that they know they went to her concert, but they can't remember anything about it.
Oh,
And
yes,
psychologists are saying it's because they weren't truly present, because they were too focused on streaming it live or
right.
Instagram
Or
selfieing that
capturing it somehow.
they
Yeah.
weren't absorbing the here and the now. And so I thought that was fascinating.
That is interesting because one of my daughters does competitive cheer. And I'm always torn between do I just want to watch this and the routine, it's like 2 minutes and 30 seconds that determines everything. Um, but I know she's going to want to watch it later and it's nice to be able to watch it later. So and even at those events and at some other events, um, I ask other people are already videoing it, so now I just go, "Hey, will you send that to me?" So I can just be, really present in this moment. So
Yeah.
that's interesting.
I wanted to talk about the parental controls, because that comes up quite a bit and I get a lot of questions about that, and I'm certain that you do as well. Um Sometimes I feel really guilty by acknowledging that I don't know if we really have all that many parental controls in place. I guess if the kids are looking at porn or trying to figure out what a penis looks like, I'm sure they could probably Google it, and maybe that's horrible. But I also kind of remember being 14, 15, 16, and I probably wanted to look up things too. I'm certain I looked up bad words, and my grandparents had Encyclopedia Britannica, the whole set. I know I was looking for things. So I don't know. I get it. I believe the best thing is to be as present of a parent as possible. Um, I talk to the kids constantly. I mean, we talked about drinking and smoking and don't join a cults, like as soon as I mean their entire lives. I don't want them to drink underage, and I don't want them to smoke, and I don't want them to do drugs. And we talk about like, well, what does a drug mean? And like, is marijuana a drug, and is aspirin a drug, and is Advil a drug? And I'm like, well, so here's the thing. At least in our state right now, marijuana is legal. So at least if you're going to do something like that, do it from a place where there is an ingredient list, so you know it's not laced with fentanyl. Like let's think things through in this way. So there's constant discussioning happening in our house about that. And then with sex and just underage stuff, I mean, watching the Gilmore Girls together and then pausing it and like, so what do you think about what Rory's choice was right there? What do you think about that? Like just constant parenting. And yes, it's exhausting. And yes, it feels kind of like it's never ending.
Yeah, as far like I don't have control. I did, and maybe part of the reason I don't is because years ago, just when we all we had was the big computer in the living room kind of thing, where everything was monitored. Oh, and then I think my daughter did get a little thing. I got some kind of subscription, but it was so clunky. And when she would actually try to do research for homeschool stuff, it was always blocking her. Um, so part of it is probably just a holdover from that. Um, and yeah, I like think just like you said, being very present, sitting down and talking, scrolling the phone with them,
Mhm.
um, is is a big thing. And also, I don't know. I don't know if it matters when they get the phone, but I mean, I think it might because if they're old enough where you've already had some of these conversations, they know the birds and the bees and some of the basics. Again, you can't control everything. They're curious about something and embarrassed to come to you, that's an easy out for
Yeah.
them. And then in our households too, they're siblings, so there's sometimes they can go to each other, which is how it should be, I think. And then you hope if one of them has a concern about something that they would come to you. And I will
Yeah.
say, I think the phones have been great because I've had kids that have been now through school all over the world. Um, and so it is a communication tool for the family to stay connected. So I guess it's just like every tool, right? You can really use it for good and it can cause trouble too.
What do you have a group chat name for your family chat?
I think I just call it five and our last name.
Okay.
I don't even
So
remember. I'm looking right now.
ours is called the nuclear fam. And then if it's just me and the girls, it's called my baby girls. Um
Yeah,
and
I
it
call ours the girls too.
the
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. So and I love it. I mean, I love bossing Siri around and telling her to send a text to the nuclear fam and stuff like that.
Well, and also, I remember reading How to Talk to Your Kids so they'll listen and listen so they'll
Yes.
talk with Adele Faber. She just passed away, right, a few months ago.
Oh, I
And
didn't know that.
one of her tips was to leave notes instead of because you leave the notes like, wet towels get hung up or whatever. Um, and it takes away some of the emotional tone and it just reminds the kids. And I feel like we have such an advantage now with texting where I can just shoot those reminders like, um, don't forget you said you do the dishes by whenever or
Yeah.
so I do like the technology for that. And I did want to talk a little bit about chores.
Oh, yes.
Um,
Sorry.
no, that's okay.
No,
And
well, both you and I have the same mindset of we're not raising children, we're raising capable future
yes,
adults. Yeah. Go
yes,
ahead. I
that is the
apologize.
goal.
I should have circled it back
No, that's
around to
okay.
that.
Just kind of reminded me that the reference to that text and also really engaging with the material world that I've been talking about is chores are a part of that. Um, and you do want your kids to be capable and able to take care of themselves. And that's something I sometimes see too in going to visit others is kids who, well, some of them might do it because there's guests over, um, but I see kids who don't,
Yeah.
or who aren't really sure how to really help because you can tell that they don't practice it or they just assume things get cleaned up. So, there's the matter of politeness, but then there's a matter of actually being able uh, to take care of yourselves. Oh, and this kind of ties into the phone too with the password. So I had said that, well, I had been in a bus crash about 5 years ago. And we actually, on that trip, it was my rule that the kids don't have phones
Mm,
because they sit there, even if they're not connected to cell or wireless or anything, they'll just listen to their music and they're in their own little world. With they put those earbuds in. And so the goal is to have them engage with each other because they don't have the phones to fall back on. Um, so the kids didn't have their phones, and we were in a pretty bad crash, and I was flown to a hospital, and my daughters had my phone, no problem. They can get into my phone, um, because they know the password. They can call their dad, they can make all of that stuff happen. But what I wanted to say, that the crash had a lot of obviously negative things and things
yeah.
that we're still dealing with. but there were a lot of blessings and things that could have been much worse. And one of the things is that sometimes I wonder, oh my gosh, what would I have done if I had little kids, if my kids
Yeah.
were little, and trying to still kind of manage and parent little kids, right? Harder to get up off the couch with a big cast to follow through and things like that.
Yeah.
But one of the good things too is that I had invested that time, and I really encourage parents, wherever you are, whether you have teenagers or whether your kids are still little, I really encourage you to invest the time into teaching your kids basic chores. And I don't even like to say chores because but basic um, life skills and tasks that they will carry with them for the rest of their lives. So knowing that, my kids can do laundry, um, knowing that they can cook basic meals for themselves, uh, things like that, that they can set and clear a table, wash the dishes. Knowing that gives me a lot of comfort when they launch. So
Yeah.
if parents, if you're thinking, um, my kid's so busy, which is true. Teenagers today are so busy. Again, another reason to invest that time before they're teenagers, when they're young. Let them start messing up. Let them start spilling things. Let them start chopping vegetables horribly, so that they can improve those skills. So by the time they're teenagers, yes, they're busy, but then they're still capable. And then they can launch into adulthood, and they're still going to flounder. They're still going to call you and be like, how do I do this? I wasn't paying attention every time you did this. But they'll have the basic skills that they need to carry them through. And that should give you a lot of comfort
Yeah.
knowing that they can take care of themselves. And I often tell the story of my mother-in-law who was diagnosed with cancer when her boys were tweens, I think, tweens and a little bit younger. Um, and I'll skip to the part where she had decades left, but at the time she did not know that. And so she wanted to make sure that they could take care of themselves.
Yeah.
So, okay, they need to know how to do laundry, they need to know how to cook, they need to know, um, all the things that we don't even think about, fold things, put it away, help around the house in all the various ways. Um, in case I'm not around to do that for them. And luckily she was. And luckily I found one of her sons who was competent in cleaning toilets and bathrooms and doing dishes, right? Because I hear a lot of, and now I know we're talking about husbands and adults, but they go through the teenage years.
Yes, they do.
And I hear people, adults, a lot of wives, kind of talk about learned helplessness of their husbands. Well, I don't know how to do that, or you can do it faster, or wives who think, oh, he's just going to mess it up. I'll just do it. That really starts in looking at our teenagers and younger, and making sure that they have the confidence and competence um, by the time they get to be teens, and then by the time they launch into their adulthood. So, start with 1, 2, 3 magic,
Yeah.
then be okay with the messes that come, and the um, not great clothes folding jobs, and the still sticky after wipe ups. Be okay with those and push through them instead of saying, oh, I'll just do it myself. So that you can have successful adults, basically.
I think that's great. Ah, thank you so much. We're going to wrap up this episode 148, but stay tuned because next week, Amylee is going to be back and she will share even more with us. Thank you for being here. I think you are amazing and wonderful and lovely. And I am so incredibly proud of you. Join us next week. We will be back. Do you have a slow living story to share? Leave me a voicemail at stephanieoday.com/podcast with any questions, comments, feedback, or testimonials, and I will be sure to include it in an upcoming episode. Also, If you found value in this episode, please share it with your family and friends and subscribe through your favorite podcast provider. The more you share, comment, and leave positive reviews, the more people we can reach and share the slow living lifestyle and messaging. Thank you, Slow Down Society, and have an absolutely wonderful day.